Yo, what is up guys, it's Pedro here. In today's video, I'll be going over a few players that could be surprise cuts for the Washington Commanders heading into the 2025 NFL season. If you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button and that notification bell as well. Trying to hit 16K subscribers. Comment down below any guys you think could be surprise cuts for the Washington Commanders. So, this is a pre-recorded video, but like I said, they're surprise cuts. So, I'm not necessarily predicting that these guys are going to get cut, but it's just one of these, all right, I'm putting it out there, so when it does happen, maybe you're still a little bit surprised, but we've talked about it. It's not completely out of the realm of possibilities. So the first guy I do want to talk about is Percy Butler. I think a lot of people have Percy Butler on the roster right now. And, you know, I don't blame you. He's been on the team for a few years now. I believe this is his fourth year. I believe it's his fourth year. I'm trying to remember, but I think he was in that same class as B-Rob, which, you know, it's B-Rob's fourth year as well. And, you know, hint, hint, he might be on this list, but we'll get into that in a second. But Percy Butler, or a couple minutes, whatever. Percy Butler, you know, the last few years has not been the best. You know, he was supposed to be a special team stud, and he hasn't been awful on special teams, but hasn't been a special team stud. And on defense, he's allowed a lot of big plays, missed tackles, and he hasn't made any really big plays for the Commanders. So for me, I wouldn't mind the Commanders cutting Percy Butler. And of all of these guys, he might be the least surprising out of them. I think Percy Butler, you know, there's better options out there that they can, you know, decide to keep. I just think that Percy Butler, you know, he's had enough time to prove if he can play or not, and I just don't think he's proved it. And Dan Quinn did mention that, you know, Jordan McGee, Benson, and Percy Butler have stood out to him this offseason. So maybe he's turned it around. Maybe he looks, you know, a little bit better. Maybe he looks like a totally different player. And in that case, you know, I'll gladly, you know, eat my words on this one and, you know, be happy that he is playing well for us. You know, maybe he'll be one of our, like, that third safety in, you know, the packages behind Quan Martin and Will Harris. But again, he hasn't shown us that he can do that over the last few years. It's just been a lot of inconsistency. It doesn't seem like, you know, his football IQ is super high, and, you know, misses some reads, misses tackles, stuff like that. You know, he has the athleticism, he has the traits, but he hasn't put it together. And by year 4, I think it's a little bit too late for it, but he does have the off season to, you know, show if he has, you know, made a big change. It's obviously going to be his last chance here in Washington. I don't think they would, you know, try to bring him back after this year unless he has a solid year. So Percy Butler, he's been on the roster the last few years, but don't be surprised if he does get cut, you know, this off season. Next guy, this is the biggest name on the list, Brian Robinson. I do not think he will get cut. But there is a possibility. I'm going to put this surprise cut out there that, you know, there's a little bit higher of a chance than maybe some people think. Brian Robinson, you know, a guy from the previous regime, same as Percy Butler, which is a disadvantage. A lot of the guys, or a lot of executives, they like keeping their own guys because they're familiar with them. And then also it just looks better on your record. All right, all your draft picks from the last 2 years are still on the team versus, you know, you keep someone's, you know, a sixth rounder from 4 years ago from Ron Rivera. You know, this is a random player. You know, I don't know, Percy Butler wasn't a sixth rounder. I believe he was a fourth rounder, but you get the point. So that's why, you know, they might be less likely to keep some of these guys. Brian Robinson, though, last year on his contract, the last few years, you know, he's been their main running back. And last year was disappointing. You know, he played in most of the games. He was playing hurt. That's the biggest thing with him. He's always off and on with his injuries. When he's healthy, he's pretty good. I wouldn't say a top 5, top 10, top 14 running back, but like he's like an average running back in the league when he is healthy. When he's not, he's below average. And, you know, there's so many running backs that you would pick over him just because this league has a lot of good running backs. And, you know, the depth at the running back position is very good. Like the 23rd ranked running back in the league is still a good running back. And that's not the case with a lot of these other positions, like the 23rd tight end. I would say is probably worse in comparison than the 23rd running back. But yeah, Brian Robinson, just hasn't really shown a lot over his last few years. His 2023 season was his best year. Had around 1,100 total yards. Let me pull this up right here. This is not Brian Robinson. It is Daron Payne. But let's bring up Brian Robinson. But he had a lot of receiving yards. Not this past season, but the season before that. I believe it was 368, if I remember correctly from the last video I did. Let's see. 368 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. Receiving wise, 5 touchdowns, rushing, so 9 total touchdowns and 1,100 yards from scrimmage. Is that elite football? No, but that's good football. This past year, played in 14 games and 958 yards from scrimmage. He's not getting a lot better. And it's year 4 now at the running back position, and it's usually these guys really find their groove in year 1, year 2. So, and you give him a pass year 1, obviously with everything that happened to him before the start of the season. But the other years, year 2 and year 3, especially this past year, I was expecting a better season from him. And they have other guys that can produce. So if Chris Rodriguez looked really, really good this offseason, if Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt looks really, really good this offseason, they might be like, you know what? We don't need Brian Robinson. And if we can trade him, so maybe it wouldn't be a surprise cut, but similar thing. If we can trade him and get even a 6th, 7th round pick, I'd rather do that than, keep him as, one of the last running backs on the team. I'm just talking about their perspective. So if those two guys look good, Rodriguez and Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt, and then even Eckler too, then you feel good about maybe losing Brian Robinson and just trading him. You trade him, you get a 6th round pick, a 7th round pick. I don't know if they can get that for Brian Robinson, but I'm just throwing it out there. And you get some draft capital, you recoup some of the picks you've lost over the last, couple seasons, really the last season-ish, last 2 off seasons, I'll say, with Adam Peters making moves, especially the last, calendar year, trading for Debo, trading for Marshawn Lattimore, trading for Laramie Tunsil. Like, they have, some draft capital that they need to recoup. So, 6th, 7th round pick isn't going to do a lot at the end of the day, but it's something, and it gives you a little bit more ammo, a little bit more capital that you can use in future drafts. So, this isn't just a Brian Robinson thing. Any guys that they think they can get good value for that aren't going to add as much value as that pick is going to add, then go ahead and trade them and get that draft capital. So with Brian Robinson, again, I think there's like a 85%, 90% chance that he makes this or that he stays on this roster starting, week 1, 2025 season. Like, he'll be on the team, like a 90% chance. But there is that chance that, maybe all the other guys are doing well and he's not, and they maybe release him, or a more likely would be a potential trade spot too, because Brian Robinson, he hasn't been super vocal about it, but he has in some of these mic'd up sessions and other stuff. You've seen that he gets frustrated, pretty frustrated when he doesn't get the ball. And last year, I thought he was getting the ball a decent amount. I mean, let's look at the season. I mean, he had a decent amount of carries, and he was getting frustrated with that. So imagine like this year, if the 7th round rookie looks good, and then Eckler's looking good, McNichols or Rodriguez, and he's not getting those carries, then who knows how upset he's going to be. So not every game he had a lot of carries, but 12, 17, 16, 21, 7. But I mean, the run game wasn't doing anything, so you can't expect to get carries then. 12, 16, and they were some of these games were blowouts. You're not going to get a lot of carries. 16, 5 wasn't doing much, and they were down by a lot, so they had to pass. 16, 21, 10, 13, 5. So was he getting a ton of carries? No, but I mean, he was getting enough, and he wasn't necessarily producing with them. So if those carries get cut down by like 10, 15, 20%, I mean, the dude's going to be a little upset. And maybe, the coaches know that, and maybe they don't want to deal with that. And that could lead to a potential cut Or what you could do is just have him as one of those, third, fourth running backs, have him take a back seat, and he'll be coming in, certain situations, pass blocking and, maybe short yardage situations. Even though I don't really think he's that good in short yardage situations, maybe that's what they want him to do. But, all likelihood is he's, the starting running back week 1, but things could happen to change that because, again, he's not an elite. Like, it's not like there's a huge difference between him and Chris Rodriguez. I honestly don't think there is. And then, not him and, Eckler in terms of production. Yeah, they're different players, but in terms of production, I think Eckler is better, to be honest. And then you have McNichols too and Ja'Cory Cross-Camara. But that was a long explanation, but just watch out for that. Next one is Dominique Hampton. So defensive back, they drafted him out of Washington, I believe. 5th round pick, 2024, one of Adam Peters' first picks. And yeah, I think, he's a potential surprise cut. I would say, a lot of people have him on the roster just because, he was a 5th round pick last year, but I don't think it was an injury. He was just inactive all last year, didn't really show much. And, he was drafted as a safety. I believe they want to use him as a hybrid between a safety and linebacker, maybe even more of a linebacker. So, he was sitting behind Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu, and it seems like, him and Bobby Wagner were pretty close. But again, a full year, didn't really do much in his rookie year. As a 5th round pick, you'd like to see him, do a little bit at least, especially with Jordan McGee out due to injuries for a lot of the season. And, even if he did, he was injured, again, that is a disadvantage, not really getting any PT your full first year. So he could make it for sure. Again, I mentioned it earlier, these draft picks, teams like to keep their own draft picks, guys that they drafted. So, you could see Dom Hampton sticking around for another year, but you could also see them cutting him and keeping him on the practice squad. I don't necessarily think teams are going to be rushing to go, claim Dom Hampton. I mean, even last year, they released Ricky Stromberg, a 3rd round pick from the year before, and no one claimed him. So it's not like Dom Hampton was a, highly touted pick prospect coming out of, Washington, was projected to be like a 2nd, 3rd round pick, or was a 2nd and 3rd round pick. No, he was a 5th round pick, and he didn't really fall or anything. He got picked where he was expected to get picked, and he just didn't do much in his rookie year. So I think he could be a potential surprise pick as well. There's some other names, but these 3 are the ones that stood out to me. If you guys have any other ones, let me know down below in the comment section. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace.